Hi, everyone. This is Jack Allwell with another money episode. Hit that subscribe button if you've been liking what I've been doing lately and the great guests we've been having on. But today I wanted to do a solo episode. Bitcoin has recently hit an all-time high. And as of right now, we're sitting at about 92,365. It is November 19th right now. And there was a video made by Mark Moss relatively recently in the last year. He's at one Mark Moss. If you want to go follow him, you gotta follow him if you like Bitcoin. And he had released an episode or a video called "The Only Bitcoin Retirement Strategy You Need." And in this, it talks about how typically to create generational wealth, one needs assets, number one, and then you don't sell the assets, essentially. You are borrowing against the assets and using that to live off of that cash from the borrowing to live off of. And you can pass it on to your kids and their kids. And hopefully the asset stays intact and keeps throwing off cash flow in some way, or just appreciates due to our fiat currency going down. So he had this calculator, and if you just click in that video that he has, you can get the calculator itself. But I wanted to go through it with you and share some of my thoughts. I've been a big proponent of borrowing against assets. That's how I got into real estate and how I got into infinite banking through borrowing on whole life insurance policies. If you want me to do a video on that, let me know. And I think this strategy on Bitcoin and the whole lives could be used in tandem. So here's his calculator, and the idea is that he is borrowing using the Bitcoin as collateral each year, and in this back test. So this is going back in time at actual results, and you can see Bitcoin has been pretty rhythmic. 3 good years followed by a bad, 3 good years followed by a bad, 3 good years followed by a bad. Um, pretty metronome like, and he's borrowing on the Bitcoin. You can see that, and then here's this loan to value. So that's a percentage of the total value of the Bitcoin. He's taking that out as debt, keeping that in interest. Now, one thing he does use 8% for the whole interest, and we'll get back to that maybe in this forecast part. But then the free cash flow is, well, the debt that he's now taken out minus the interest. And in the next year, he's basically paying off the loan from the prior year and doing the same thing each year. And he's manipulating these loan to values in a way to get essentially fairly regular free cash flow payments and basically living off that. And but this is obviously assuming you put $5,000 into Bitcoin in January of 2011 when it was 30 cents per Bitcoin. So you would have had almost 16,667 Bitcoin. So moving on to the forecast. So this is projecting into the future. Now his calculator starts at the beginning of 2024, but I just wanted to show it as of a more recent time. So I plugged that in. But yeah, it's gone up a lot this year, obviously. And I just assumed it might go up another 5% before year end. So that's what this is. You can just play with these loan to values and kind of think through what free cash flows you would get. Now, a couple of thoughts I had when I was looking at this. So in the first time, and he's not pulling it out right away, but like the idea would be to let it ride a few years before you start doing this. But the interest is at 8% that first year, and then he moves it to 10. And that made me think that's interesting because in my mind, who would want to lend um at these rates when you could just buy the Bitcoin if people really think it's going to catch on. And so that would be one thing I would point out, that I think the interest rates might be much higher than what we think here. Let me know what you think about that. I'm very curious. And then also, I don't know. I mean, I know on Coinbase, I think you can borrow against your Bitcoin right now. I haven't looked into it too much. Last time I checked, I thought it was over 10%, but that was a couple of years ago. If you've borrowed from your Bitcoin, please let me know. And I'm curious what interest rate you've actually paid to borrow against your Bitcoin and what the terms were. What was it, just a 1 year um, basically debt agreement. Um, so that would be one thing. And then, so like with real estate, like if people want to go borrow against their real estate, typically, there's closing costs. Like you have to pay, closing services, the bank, for documents and all that stuff. So I'm curious what the closing costs might turn into because this could become a big industry and there might be closing costs associated with this. So that would be another thing to look at. And, I mean, and of course, these are just assumptions baked in these gains. And you can see that the trend that he's in his baseline assumption is that it's getting less volatile as we go through time. You see like the big drops become lower or less intense, and the increases become less intense. So the volatility is slowly draining off over time. And another thing I thought it might be worthwhile to touch on because I know Mark Moss has mentioned that your hurdle rate should be around 15%. So if if you do have, I was just curious what these free cash flows really feel like. So in today's numbers, like the free cash flow of 24,000, if we assume 1.1 or like a 10% discount, basically, that feels like 16,000 today. And you can see here that it's actually going down. Um, so that's another thing you might want to play around with these numbers and see what you can come up with and what you might have to change the LTVs to get more of a constant stream and like in terms of purchasing power. Um, so those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think. It's a cool calculator. I definitely thought about this more for like infinite banking, but yeah, it would be really cool if people start borrowing from their Bitcoin. Take care.